I got a full stack of James Warhola cards from 1995. That's some interesting art, so I just wanted to showcase it and talk about the back anecdotes.
The Mayan demon. There are both advantages and disadvantages to using photo references. Here, I feel I relied too much on the photos since the boy looks so stiff. Star arc. It's always a concern to find a different approach to what's been done before. Here, I tried to portray the starry universe with as much color and depth as possible. Time travel. I used a keyhole design to show the boy running through a time portal. The warm light inside and the cool light outside helped show the change. Light green men. Creatures such as little green men can be designed to be serious or humorous or somewhere in between. It all depends on the nature of the book. Flexible Frank. I work on both masonite and canvas depending on the amount of brushwork that I want to be noticed. This one of a brainy robot inventor and artist friend, Dirk Zimmer, was painted on canvas. Time-traveling Viking. I sculpted everything in this scene out of plastiline so I could better portray the effect of light. It certainly helped, but I think I had more fun sculpting. Man versus lobster. This is what I came up with when an art director told me to think of the character as a futuristic nerd. Of course, the lobster creature was pretty self-explanatory. Another cute robot. It might have been my mood or the tight deadline that led to this looser painting style, but I actually prefer this freer approach. Unleashed power. Creating a space that doesn't exist is both a challenge and a pleasure. Even in the most imaginary realms, an artist must draw from the real world. The same principle applies to designing objects and creatures. The enemy is down. I've rarely used an overall red color scheme, but for some reason it seemed to work perfectly for this painting. The four-armed Joban. Inventing strange humanoid creatures is a prerequisite to being a fantasy artist. The variations are endless, and that's why a description by a writer is always helpful. The discovery of Grunk. This is a very early portfolio piece that I did for Questar magazine. Underlighting is always a great effect, if not overused. The Greenstone Curse. I had a lot of great elements from the story to work with, and that really helps. They all came together nicely for a dramatic scene. Stranger in a Strange Land. I am most proud of this painting, as it illustrated a novel long touted as the greatest science fiction story ever written. Just like an actor taking on their most significant role, I was an extremely nervous artist working on such a famous book. I certainly learned a lot about grokking. The Scythe and the Blade. Photographing models is tremendous fun since it's an opportunity for the artist to be a big-time director. Casting, costumes, lighting, and camera angles all need to be carefully managed for good reference. Agent of Perfection. To portray the characters well, I constantly reread and go over details. Quite often, someone in real life will inspire my portrayal, and in this case, the main character, Friday, is represented by my dearest friend, Mary. Spacesuit Sweepstakes. Robert Heinlein is my favorite author, and he wrote this great story in the 50s about a boy who wins a spacesuit. Universal Tourists. This was my futuristic version of a mother and son as space tourists. My aim was to concentrate on their personalities and expressions. Prison City. It's always nice to use the city where you live as an immediate reference for a painting. I remember running around New York City trying to get the right viewpoint to show it as a no man's land. Cloned World. Jumpsuits are an important part of my costume collection. They're extremely useful for posing friends for science fiction scenes. Atomic Trooper. The challenge was to dream up a suit of armor that could withstand atomic blasts during battle. Of course, weight wouldn't be a problem since it would function in a low-gravity environment. Worlds Afar. The woman in this story was such a strong and admirable character that I felt I had to do a close-up portrait of her. I didn't realize that her red hair would be so striking, but it really adds to her intensity. Stranded with CG. My only difficulty in this painting was designing a cute, chubby, little obnoxious robot. The Jeweled Terminal. In 1987, cyberpunk was the new genre, and I was very proud to be a part of the world's first taste of virtual reality with the cover of William Gibson's groundbreaking novel, Neuromancer. Powerful Orb. The glowing orb is a common element in both science fiction and fantasy. A different approach is always welcome, so here I used a highly reflective chrome ball. Space Med. Very early in my career, I created this scene of a space-traveling doctor. I used a minimum of color to give it that clinical look. Forbidden Spaceship. I love painting the figure and designing flashy space costumes with all the accessories. This is a tale of a lone female space traveler trapped in a haunted ship. An unusual golfing expedition. Fellow artist and neighbor Jim Gurney posed as the guy reading the newspaper. We often pose for each other since we really know how to ham it up. Alien muggers. This particular scene was a minor aspect of the story, but it really summed up the strange nature of the book. Angry ogre. The only scale reference I had to work with were the trees. To make the giant look huge, the trees had to appear very small. An evening surprise. Incorporating one of the classic B-movie monsters into a painting was quite a thrill. This piece was for a book about old monster movies. Elfin food fight. It's great to come from a large family with lots of brothers, sisters, nephews, and nieces, an endless supply of models for every occasion. My little nephew Donnie was perfect for a mischievous pie thrower. Virtual reality writer. My first paperback cover was liked so much by the author that he bought the painting. Mortality of knowledge. Here is an unpublished painting in which I was honing my skills as a realist. The better you can paint what's in front of you, the more able you'll be to paint from your imagination. Stonehenge fighters. At a young age, I read books by Robert E. Howard and was mesmerized by their covers by Jones, Frazetta, and Krenkel. Though I may not do many barbarian themes, I see these greats as wonderful inspiration. The Magic Shop. This is an old favorite. Its design developed as I collected my references. These great gargoyles really exist on a Stanford White building in New York City. Carpet travel. The Arabian Nights theme is such a wonderful source for fantasy and magic. It wasn't too difficult to come up with the idea of carpet flying. Dragon ambush. Dragon ambush. I have a lot of respect for artists who can paint dragons in flight and make them look natural. To me, it's a creature that always seems to defy logic with its ability to fly. Dark temple. Night scenes with glowing fires are always favorites of mine. The moodiness that can be achieved with the light is very special. Bat robot. This story called for a mechanical bat. In a previous book, I had sculpted a bat-like creature as a model, so I reused it, giving it a metallic look. Midnight research. A small dragon that hides out in a bookstore and reads at night was a wonderful premise for this cover. Dragonflight. Many artists sometimes need to sculpt an actual creature to provide a model to work from, as I did here with the bat creature. Unfortunately, plasticine clay isn't very permanent over time. The mythical hammer. Designing a figure in flight is not an easy task. It requires a lot of sketching and tracing paper before a convincing pose is devised. Some artists achieve an image in their career that has a magic that can never be duplicated. Such is the case with this formal portrait of a future gladiator. This old favorite now resides in a small museum in eastern Slovakia. Immortal joy. For some reason, this painting turned out looking spiritual to the point of being religious. Most people don't immediately notice that she has 6 fingers. Glory's treasure. Friends and family provide me with an endless variety of models. Of course, I customize everyone to fit the character, such as my father as the hooded dwarf. The Snow Ghouls. This was a very early sample with no storyline. Its only purpose was to be shown to art directors for possible work. The Sword of Alcar. Creating a lighting effect often involves experimentation until it's just right. By working in transparent oils, I was able to achieve more luminosity in the sword. To best show the wizard's dual personality, I decided to simply split the painting in 2. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. Black Death Fighter. Painting armor can be difficult, especially when it has to be totally constructed from your imagination. It required me to go to a museum several times to study its reflective metal quality. Blue Crystal Darkover. In some rare situations, I had the privilege of using a professional model for the lead character. I also went to the extent of finding the right fabric and embroidery to make the cloak. The challenge. Castles are one thing in the fantasy world that you don't need to fake with your imagination. I've visited many castles throughout Europe and have accumulated quite a reference collection. Master Krenkel. Roy Krenkel was one of the finest fantasy illustrators of all time. I was very fortunate to know him and have the chance to paint him for this story, ironically called Exit the Master. Enchanted Flight. Horses are such beautiful creatures to witness, let alone paint. I find them extremely difficult subjects, so I'm constantly learning something new. Wizard Chase. When designing an image, I always exhaust every conceivable viewpoint of a scene, and sometimes I hit upon one that both works and is unique. Yes, master, can I hold him? I love the Victorian period, especially when it comes to a mad scientist's laboratory. Many of the objects I painted from life, and the more distant elements were from my imagination. Upper mobility. I've always enjoyed dreams about flying, so I was completely inspired while painting this piece. Dead Wizard Rising. For convenience, I often pose myself for different characters in my paintings. Here, I used myself as a French inspector type, peering through the doorway. Lonely Old Wizard. Sometimes I'll meet someone whose presence will inspire an idea for a painting. Such was the case with this piece when I met an 80-year-old neighbor who was thrilled to pose. George and the Blunzer. Science fiction often requires an artist to be adept at painting what is referred to in the business as hardware. Peculiarly, my robots and machinery often end up looking like they were made in the 1950s. Magical dowsing. A warm light in a cool atmosphere often creates a fun color scheme. It's ideal for adding depth, form, and mystery. Mirror fright. Selecting the right moment in a story is not always easy, as there are usually so many. This nightmarish scene of being pulled into a bedroom mirror by strange demons seemed most appropriate to represent the book. Basement surprise. Creating a dramatic scene like this has an energy that you wouldn't get with other scenes. Finding the right solution always leads to a discovery. Alfred as Bella. Working for Mad Magazine was a dream come true, as it was my primary education growing up. The Mad offices are zanier than anyone can imagine. A warm welcome. Whenever I get the chance, I enjoy poking a little fun at some old screen idols. I do this with a touch of exaggeration and a twist of humor. Alfred as Frank. Someone had heard that I did a good Frankensteins, so I was commissioned to create my first of many pieces for Mad Magazine. The Vampire Hunter. I achieved much of the finish at the underpainting stage. I worked the oils very transparently with stable brushes to keep the effect soft. Chapter 13. Sometimes, while doing numerous thumbnail sketches, I hit upon something that feels so right that I can't believe it. This was the case for this collection of horror stories. Thrill Night at Donna's. What a treat it was to paint such a wonderful cast of characters. This is when I discovered that I really enjoyed camp humor, and the photo shoot was a real riot. Graveyard Follies. This is my favorite graveyard scene because I was able to fill it with so many fun details. It was perfect for a collection of short stories about ghosts. The Open Tomb. Painting technique is always a learning experience. Here, it was about figuring out how to imply glittering detail without having to paint every little jewel. The Smell of Death. For a period, I did a number of graveyard paintings, which gave me the opportunity to hang around graveyards collecting reference. New England gravestones are the best. Party at Frank's. The real challenge here was fitting everyone in comfortably while leaving room for the title. Though it can be nerve-wracking at times, it's always a pleasure to see the final printed piece. A Boozing Bunch. A scene like this is such a conglomeration of different references that sometimes I don't know where to start. I make sure to have lots of tracing paper on hand. Baroom Chess. Placing a unicorn in a chair is as anatomically challenging as things get. Fantasy literature never ceases to surprise. Visitor's Night at Callahan's. Alien Baroom scenes offer so much freedom in the fantasy world. There are endless situations and characters to dream up. A beautiful pub in Greenwich Village called the Cedar Tavern served as the model here. Visitor's Night at Callahan's. My father loves to be in my paintings. Knowing how much of a ham he is, I gave him a mustache and a toupee and made him the bartender. Naturally, I couldn't easily photograph the non-human patrons, though I can think of a few that inspired them. Visitor's Night at Callahan's. This space-traveling hunk is my artist friend, Wayno Drano. He looks bizarre because he is bizarre, and I should mention that his exotic companion's name is Sharon. Callahan's. This was my very first alien Baroom scene, inspired by writer Spider Robinson. My sister's wedding reception occurred just before the painting's deadline, providing a convenient photo opportunity. Many of the patrons here were family and friends. Callahan's. This painting started a whole new career for me. I've received endless requests to create more alien Baroom scenes. They're great fun, but the details require a lot of time and effort. Santa and a Few Friends. An artist always second guesses a painting after seeing the printed piece. The size reduction from the original often reveals possible improvements. Here, I think the lighting could have been better. Lady Sally's. Just painting the front of a building didn't seem all that exciting until I treated each window as a separate stage for some interesting activity. It has a way of bringing out the voyeur in the viewer. Medieval Carnival. Festive scenes are tremendous fun, especially if they're medieval. Unfortunately, I love detail, so they take me much longer to paint. Gargoyle Mayhem. Green is always a hard color to deal with, but here I thought I was able to create a very eerie mood using it. The Devoted Droid. Spaceships can come in so many different shapes, but they shouldn't look clumsy. Perspective is always a consideration, no matter how painterly one gets. The Sorcerer's Airy. Wizards' workshops are a personal favorite of mine. I love this kind of detail, though it can be an exercise in tedium. 18th century Dutch genre paintings, particularly those depicting similar alchemical workplaces, served as great inspiration. Deadly Planet. A harmonious color scheme is crucial for creating an atmospheric effect. To achieve this, I used a bit of one color mixed throughout, and here that color was phthalo blue. 7 in 1 Blow. Of the several children's books I've done, I included only this cover in the card series. I see this Brothers Grimm tale and other classics as some of the earliest works in the fantasy genre. F Troops in Space. I usually show an art director at least 3 different pencil designs. Once one is approved, I start collecting reference and shooting models.